Zakat, obligatory Islamic charity. Zakat, zakah, zakah, that which purifies. Also zakat al-mal, zakat al-mal, zakat on wealth, or zakah, is a form of alms-giving treated in Islam as a religious obligation, a tax which, by Quranicranking, is next after prayer. Salat. In importance. As one of the 5 pillars of Islam, zakat is a religious obligation for all Muslims who meet the necessary criteria of wealth. It is not a charitable contribution, and is considered to be a tax, or obligatory alms. The payment and disputes on zakat have played a major role in the history of Islam, notably during the Ridda wars. Zakat is based on income and the value of all of one's possessions. It is customarily 2.5%, or 1/40th, of a Muslim's total savings and wealth above a minimum amount known as nisab, but Islamic scholars differ on how much nisab is and other aspects of zakat. The collected amount is paid first to zakat collectors, and then to poor Muslims, to new converts to Islam, to Islamic clergy, and others. Today, in most Muslim-majority countries, zakat contributions are voluntary, while in a handful, Libya, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Yemen, zakat is mandated and collected by the state. Shias, unlike Sunnis, have traditionally regarded zakat as a private and voluntary decision, and they give zakat to imam-sponsored rather than state-sponsored collectors. Etymology. Zakat literally means that which purifies. Zakat is considered a way to purify one's income and wealth from sometimes worldly, impure ways of acquisition. According to Sachiko Murata and William Chittick, just as ablutions purify the body and salat purifies the soul in Islam, so zakat purifies possessions and makes them pleasing to God. Doctrine. Quran. The Quran discusses charity in many verses, some of which relate to zakat. The word zakat, with the meaning used in Islam now, is found in surahs 7, 156, 19, 31, 19, 55, 21, 73, 23, 4, 27, 3, 30, 39, 31, 4 and 41. 7. Zakat is found in the early Medinan surahs and described as obligatory for Muslims. It is given for the sake of salvation. Muslims believe those who give zakat can expect reward from God in the afterlife, while neglecting to give zakat can result in damnation. Zakat is considered part of the covenant between God and a Muslim. According to Yusuf al-Qaradawi, verse 9.5 of the Quran makes zakat one of 3 prerequisites for pagans to become Muslims. But if they repent, establish prayers, and practice zakat, they are your brethren in faith. The Quran also lists who should receive the benefits of zakat, discussed in more detail below. Hadith. Each of the most trusted hadith collections in Islam have a book dedicated to zakat. Sahih Bukhari's Book 24, Sahih Muslim's Book 5, and Sunan Abu Dawood's Book 9 discuss various aspects of zakat, including who must pay, how much, when and what. The 2.5% rate is also mentioned in the hadiths. The hadiths admonish those who do not give the zakat. According to the hadith, refusal to pay a mockery of those who pay zakat is a sign of hypocrisy, and God will not accept the prayers of such people. The Sunnah also describes God's punishment for those who refuse or fail to pay zakat. On the Day of Judgment, those who did not give the zakat will be held accountable and punished. The hadith contain advice on the state-authorized collection of the zakat. The collectors are required not to take more than what is due, and those who are paying the zakat are asked not to evade payment. The hadith also warn of punishment for those who take zakat when they are not eligible to receive it. See distribution below. Amount. Main article. Calculation of zakat. The amount of zakah to be paid by an individual depends on the amount of money and the type of assets the individual possesses. The Quran does not provide specific guidelines on which types of wealth are taxable under the zakat, nor does it specify percentages to be given. But the customary practice is that the amount of zakat paid on capital assets, e.g., money, is 2.5%. 1/40th. Zakat is additionally payable on agricultural goods, precious metals, minerals, and livestock at a rate varying between 2.5% and 20%. 1/5, depending on the type of goods. Zakat is usually payable on assets continuously owned over 1 lunar year that are in excess of the nisab, a minimum monetary value. However, Islamic scholars have disagreed on this issue. For example, Abu Hanifa did not regard the nisab limit to be a prerequisite for zakat in the case of land crops, fruits and minerals. Other differences between Islamic scholars on zakat and nisab are acknowledged as follows by Yusuf al-Qaradawi. Unlike prayers, we observe that even the ratio, the exemption, the kinds of wealth that are zakatable are subject to differences among scholars. Such differences have serious implications for Muslims at large when it comes to their application of the Islamic obligation of zakat. For example, some scholars consider the wealth of children and insane individuals zakatable, others don't. Some scholars consider all agricultural products zakatable, others restrict zakat to specific kinds only. Some consider debts zakatable, others don't. Similar differences exist for business assets and women's jewelry. Some require certain minimum nisab for zakatability, some don't, etc. The same kind of differences also exist about the disbursement of zakat. Sheikh Mahmud shouted, "Failure to pay." Some classical jurists have held the view that any Muslim who consciously refuses to pay zakat is an apostate, since the failure to believe that it is a religious duty, fard, is a form of unbelief, kufr, and should be killed. However, prevailing opinion among classical jurists prescribed sanctions such as fines, imprisonment or corporal punishment. Additionally, those who failed to pay the zakat would face God's punishment in the afterlife on the Day of Judgment. The consequence of failure to pay zakat has been a subject of extensive legal debate, particularly when a Muslim is willing to pay zakat but refuses to pay it to a certain group of the state. According to classical jurists, if the collector is unjust in the collection of zakat but just in its distribution, the concealment of property from him is allowed. If, on the other hand, the collector is just in the collection but unjust in the distribution, the concealment of property from him is an obligation. Wajib. Furthermore, if the zakat is concealed from a just collector because the property owner wanted to pay his zakat to the poor himself, they held that he should not be punished for it. If collection of zakat by force was not possible, use of military force to extract it was seen as justified, as was done by Abu Bakr during the Ridda wars, on the argument that refusing to submit to just orders is a form of treason. However, Abu Hanifa, the founder of the Hanafi school, disapproved of fighting when the property owners undertake to distribute the zakat to the poor themselves. Some classical and contemporary scholars such as Ishaq ibn Rawayh and Yusuf al-Qaradawi have stated that the person who fails to pay zakat should have the payment taken from them, along with half of his wealth. In modern states where zakat payment is compulsory, failure to pay is regulated by state law similarly to tax evasion. Distribution. According to the Quran's Surah Al-Tawbah, there are 8 categories of people, As and Af, who qualify to benefit from zakat funds. Alms are for the poor and the needy, and those employed to administer the funds, for those whose hearts have been recently reconciled to truth, for those in bondage and in debt, in the cause of Allah, and for the wayfarer, Thus is it. ordained by Allah, and Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. Single quote. Quran, Surah 9. Al-Tawbah. Ayat 60. Scholars have traditionally interpreted this verse as identifying the following 8 categories of Muslim causes to be the proper recipients of zakat. Those living without means of livelihood. Al-Fuqara, the poor. Those who cannot meet the basic needs. Al-Masakin, the needy. To zakat collectors. Al-Amilyan alayha. To persuade those sympathetic to or expected to convert to Islam. Al-Mu'allafatu qulubuhum, recent converts to Islam and potential allies in the cause of Islam. To free from slavery or servitude. Furriqab, slaves of Muslims who have or intend to free from the master by means of a kitaba contract. Those who have incurred overwhelming debts while attempting to satisfy the basic needs. Al-Gharimin, debtors who in pursuit of a worthy goal incurred a debt. Those fighting for a religious cause or a cause of God. Fi sabilillah, or for jihad in the way of Allah by means of pen, word, or sword, or for Islamic warriors who fight against the unbelievers but are not salaried soldiers. Wayfarers, stranded travelers. Ibnu al-Sabil, travelers who are traveling with a worthy goal but cannot reach the destination without financial assistance. Zakat should not be given to one's own parents, grandparents, children, her children, spouses, or the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. Neither the Quran nor the Hadith specify the relative division of zakat into the above 8 categories. According to the reliance of the traveler, the Shafi'i school requires zakat is to be distributed equally among the 8 categories of recipients, while the Hanafi school permits zakat to be distributed to all the categories, some of them, or just one of them. Classical schools of Islamic law, including Shafi'i, are unanimous that collectors of zakat are to be paid first, with the balance to be distributed equally amongst the remaining 7 categories of recipients, even in cases where one group's need is more demanding. Muslim scholars disagree whether zakat recipients can include non-Muslims. Islamic scholarship, historically, has taught that only Muslims can be recipients of zakat. In recent times, some state that zakat may be paid to non-Muslims after the needs of Muslims have been met, finding nothing in the Quran or Sunnah to indicate that zakat should be paid to Muslims only. Additionally, the zakat funds may be spent on the administration of a centralized zakat collection system. Representatives of the Salafi movement include propagation of Islam and any struggle in righteous cause among permissible ways of spending, while others argue that zakat funds should be spent on social welfare and economic development projects, or science and technology education. Some hold spending them for defense to be permissible if a Muslim country is under attack. Also, it is forbidden to disperse zakat funds into investments instead of being given to one of the above 8 categories of recipients. Zakat al-Fitr. Zakat al-Fitr or Sadaqah al-Fitr is another, smaller charitable obligation, mandatory for all Muslims, male or female, minor or adult, as long as she has the means to do so. That is traditionally paid at the end of the fasting in the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The collected amount is used to pay the zakat collectors and to the poor Muslims so that they may be provided with a means to celebrate Eid al-Fitr, the festival of breaking the fast, following Ramadan, along with the rest of the Muslims. Zakat al-Fitr is a fixed amount assessed per person, while Zakat al-Mal is based on personal income and property. According to one source, the Hidayah Foundation, the suggested Zakat al-Fitr donation is based on the price of 1 SAA, approximately 3 kilograms of rice or wheat at local costs as of 2015, approximately $7 in the US.